Hi, this is Dave. Hey, do you ever think about your spirituality? Do you wonder ever if there is something deeper and more meaningful for your life? Well, you're not alone. George Barna, the researcher, has unearthed a condition of modern American life, and I'm going to quote here from one of his recent studies. Quote, recent studies at our Barna Research Group shows that more and more people are plagued by a nagging emptiness that is anchored deep within themselves. It is a crisis of meaning that affects millions of Americans. So millions of people feel an emptiness and recognize it as a lack of spiritual growth on their part. And so they search for something spiritual to fill that void. Unfortunately, many are searching in the wrong places, their energies being diffused by an errant understanding of spirituality. You know, I was recently contacted by the publishers of a website devoted to exploring spiritual issues for business people. Would I like to contribute some content, they wanted to know. Before I answered, I viewed the site. The first article discussed the spiritual feelings the author experienced during a walk in the forest. Another discussed the spiritual connection he felt with other humans as a result of an exercise in a seminar. Now, all the other articles repeated the same themes. Spirituality, according to these writers, was an experience of solitude or an emotion or a sense of one's similarity to other human beings, or even a sense of being part of nature. So I declined the invitation. I'm not sure what the site was about, but I know it wasn't spirituality. The site was another example of the trend to dumb down spirituality, sort of like the political correctness trend. The more general and vague a concept is, the more people you can include in it, and the less meaning and power it has. Everyone subscribes to the concept of freedom, for example, but you see considerable drop-off when you link it to personal responsibility. Spirituality, the turn of the century, has come to mean in the common usage almost anything the speaker wants it to mean. So do you have a warm feeling as a result of a laugh you shared with someone? Well, that must be spiritual. Or you feel a little introspective while out on a sailboat? That's got to be a spiritual experience. Sense a bit of connection with another human being? You must truly be spiritual soulmates. Don't understand my position. These are all valid and valuable moments. However, while all these experiences and others of a similar nature may be warm, pleasant, intuitive, they aren't spiritual. To call them spiritual is to detract from that which really is spiritual and to distract people from the search for the genuine article. Provide people with a cheap substitute, and you often knock them off the quest for the better original. The ice cream store won't sell very much Haagen-Dazs, for example, if they give away Dairy Queen. So if these kinds of experiences are not spiritual, then what is? So let's start at the source. You know, there's a body of knowledge concerning things spiritual available to us, and it's called the Bible. The information concerning things spiritual in the Bible is really quite clear, consistent, and pretty simple. God is spirit. Anything having to do with God is spirit. Chuol. Let me repeat that. God is spirit. So anything having to do with God is spiritual. God has, for his own reasons, lopped off and spread around parts of the spiritualness that originated with him. There are, for example, totally spiritual beings. The Bible refers to them as angels and demons. In addition, God has imbued part of his spiritualness into human beings. There is a spiritual part of every human being. It's that part of us that lives on after our physical body dies, and is particularly characterized by its hunger for communication with its Creator. And we can all relate to that. There are probably few human beings who haven't had, in moments of solitude and reflection, a sense of the infinite, a hunger to contact God. That's our spirit hungering for communication with its Maker. It is a predictable, naturally occurring event. We are all some part spiritual, and that part longs for completion by communication with its maker. In the same way that a male instinctively searches for a female that will complement and complete him, and vice versa. One of the most natural things in the world is to search for God. That's spiritual. So, spiritual has to do with our search for communion or conversation, connection with God. We grow spiritually when we move toward that relationship with our Maker and when we grow more intimate with Him. Anything else, all the other prescriptions for spiritual growth, miss the mark and detract our spirits from their instinctive destination. So let's use this understanding and apply it to some commonly considered spiritual moments. For example, when we experience a feeling of connectedness to other human beings, that's not spiritual. Dogs, chimpanzees, and porpoises recognize a similarity to others of their species as well. That's just one member of a species recognizing another. However, when we experience a hunger for communication with God, that is spiritual. So you feel a bond with another person. You're somehow mystically drawn to that person. Is that spiritual? No. In a world with billions of people, it's only natural that some are going to rub you the wrong way and some you're going to feel an affinity. It's just natural. It's not spiritual. On a solitary hike into the mountains, you stop for a rest at a scenic place and are awed by the grandeur of what you see. Is that spiritual? Well, I think it could be. The physical beauty and the feeling it inspires are natural, not spiritual. But if that beauty and those emotions cause you to reflect on the nature of God and your place in His scheme, or perhaps they prompt you to offer a short prayer, then that part of the experience is spiritual. See, it's about connecting with God. Here's another. You go to the local church and half-heartedly go along with the worship rituals. You sort of mouth the words to the songs in a voice no one else can hear. You listen to part of the prayers and kind of follow along the messages from the pulpit. Surely that must be spiritual. Well, it depends. If you're doing these things out of habit or because of your interest in being seen by other people, then of course it's not spiritual. It has nothing to do with communing with God. If, however, you are striving through these actions to commune with God and to learn about Him and His interest in you, then yes, those are spiritual. See, so what's the point of all this? If you want to grow spiritually, you must search for communication with God. If you want to work on the spiritual side of you, it must be somehow connected with God. You must find Him, and your spirit must intermingle with His. Any event which in some way moves you closer to God is spiritual. If it leads you in other directions, it is not. So if you want to develop the spiritual side of you, don't think that yoga, Zen, herbal concoctions, crystals, pyramids, and past life regression, support groups, and their like will help. They may be fun, they may be interesting, they may be good for you in other ways, but they are not spiritual. If you want to build up the spiritual side of you, search for communion with God. One of the themes expressed throughout the Bible is this: if you seek God, He will reveal Himself to you. That promise is repeated over and over again. Moses recorded it in the earliest days of the Bible when he said, quote, "But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find Him if you look for Him with all your heart and with all your soul." That's from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 29. Very early in the history of the Israelite people. King Solomon, King David, and many of the prophets repeated the same promise. Jesus repeated it in slightly different words during the famous Sermon on the Mount, when he said, quote, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you." That's Matthew 7:7. Too many people spend their whole lives in a quest for spiritual fulfillment and never meet God. Too often it's because they've been deluded with false idea of what spiritual really is. They, like the refrain from the song, look for love at all the wrong places. Don't let that mistaken idea knock you off course. Stay focused on connection with God. Okay, hey, just a couple things before we go. If you are getting anything from these podcasts, about 10 minutes plus or minus every week, then share it with others. Well, yeah, I'd like to build up the number of people that we contact and communicate with. So share it with others. Recommend it. We'd sure appreciate that. And subscribe. You can sign up for it every week at the whatever software you're using to listen to it. Okay, that's it. We're done. Bye-bye.